What if I told you that a single American factory produced more warplanes than the entire German industry combined? This is the story of the greatest industrial humiliation in history. May 28, 1940. Berlin, Germany. Hermann Göring, the second most powerful man in the Nazi regime and supreme commander of the German Air Force known as the Luftwaffe, dropped an intelligence report with utter contempt. The document explained that U.S. President Roosevelt had asked the American Congress for something unprecedented, that the factories of the United States be able to manufacture 50,000 airplanes each year. The Americans are desperate if they think such fantasies will scare us, Göring told his subordinates. They know nothing about building weapons. Let them try to turn their car factories into airplane factories. They'll soon see that building military planes requires far more than simple assembly lines. What Göring didn't know was that in Detroit, the American city famous for its automobile industry, a Danish immigrant named William Knudsen was already proving him wrong. This former president of General Motors, the famous car company, was now working for just $1 a year as Roosevelt's chief of war production. Knudsen was organizing the most ambitious industrial transformation in human history. In only 4 years, American factories would not produce the impossible 50,000 airplanes Göring had mocked, but nearly 100,000 aircraft a year, while simultaneously supplying military equipment to 2 theaters of war on opposite oceans. The declaration that provoked the German scorn occurred on May 16, 1940. Just as German tanks were advancing relentlessly through France. Standing before Congress, Franklin Roosevelt, the American president, firmly declared, "I should like to see this nation equipped to produce at least 50,000 airplanes a year." The reaction was skeptical, even among allies. In 1939, the United States had produced only 3,711 military aircraft. The Army Air Corps owned 1,700 combat planes, many of them obsolete and outdated. Yet Roosevelt demanded a 14-fold increase in production. William Knudsen became the architect of this miracle. When asked who could achieve such impossible output, presidential advisor Bernard Baruch answered without hesitation. First, Bill Knudsen. Second, Bill Knudsen. Third, Bill Knudsen. Knudsen had given up a $300,000 annual salary, a fortune at the time, to serve his adopted nation, bringing the principles of mass automobile production to aircraft manufacturing. The transformation began immediately. By December 1941, American factories were producing 2,000 military planes each month, 20 times more than 2 years before. The Ford Motor Company, the legendary automaker, announced plans for a massive bomber plant at Willow Run, Michigan. Boeing expanded its facilities in Seattle. Douglas Aircraft, another aviation company, hired thousands of workers. The arsenal of democracy was awakening. General Friedrich von Boettcher, the German military attaché in Washington from 1933 to 1941, sent accurate reports describing the American industrial mobilization. His cable of December 1940 clearly warned, American war production will reach unimaginable heights. Berlin dismissed these warnings as defeatist exaggerations. Prejudice permeated every level. Luftwaffe intelligence dismissed reports of women entering aircraft factories as signs of American desperation. They could not conceive that democratic mobilization could surpass totalitarian command. When reports arrived of factories running 3 work shifts, German analysts assumed it was an exaggeration. The Nazi worldview simply could not accommodate American reality. Ford's Willow Run plant embodied American ambition. Built on farmland beginning April 18, 1941, it became the largest factory in the world under a single roof, 3.5 million square feet, with a 1-mile-long assembly line. Charles Sorensen, Ford's production chief, promised to build a B-24 Liberator bomber, a heavy 4-engine aircraft designed for long-range missions, every hour, when other factories managed just 1 per day. The initial results were disastrous. The first bomber, completed in September 1942, required a full rebuild. Quality control failures reached 50%. By February 1943, Willow Run was producing only 56 bombers a month, far short of the promised hundreds. Critics nicknamed it Will It Run, a pun on the factory's name. But Ford's engineers persevered. They divided the B-24's 488,193 parts into manageable subassemblies, developed hydraulic riveting tools, prefabricated wiring harnesses, and introduced mobile assembly lines. They implemented 578 design changes in 1943 alone, while keeping production on track. By September 1943, monthly output reached 148 bombers. By December, 365. The Great Leap came in April 1944, when Willow Run produced 428 B-24s, one every 63 minutes, 24 hours a day. This single factory was outperforming the entire German aircraft industry. German pilots first recognized American production superiority during the Tunisian campaign in North Africa. Major Johannes Steinhoff, commanding a squadron of German fighters, noted in December 1942, "The American pilots are no longer amateurs. What is most alarming is that there are more of them every day." The revelation accelerated throughout 1943. On January 27th, the first American attack on Germany itself took place, 64 bombers striking the city of Wilhelmshaven. By October, during the so-called Black Thursday in Schweinfurt, when they targeted German ball-bearing factories, the Americans could lose 60 B-17 bombers, another four-engine heavy bomber known as the Flying Fortress, and replace them within 2 weeks. The math had become undeniable. During Big Week, from February 20th to 25, 1944, the U.S. 8th and 15th Air Forces mounted 3,500 bomber sorties against German aircraft production. The Luftwaffe lost between 262 and 355 fighters, but more critically, around 100 irreplaceable veteran pilots. General Adolf Galland, one of Germany's top pilots and commander of the Luftwaffe's fighter forces. Major Heinz Baer, one of Germany's leading aces with 220 aerial victories, described a January 1944 mission over Brunswick. The bomber stream stretched from horizon to horizon, at least 700 flying fortresses and liberators. We were 8 fighters against hundreds. It was impossible. By 1944, American aircraft production had reached staggering proportions. That year alone, factories produced 96,270 aircraft, 16,048 four-engine bombers, 35,743 fighters, and 22,591 multi-engine planes. The output of this single year surpassed the total German production for the entire war, approximately 94,677 aircraft. The disparity went far beyond numbers. Each American bomber carried 13 .50 caliber machine guns, powerful heavy weapons with thousands of rounds of ammunition. German fighters increasingly launched with partial ammo loads. American bombers featured powered turrets, advanced bomb sights, and sophisticated navigation equipment. German fighters often lacked working radios. Boeing's Plant No. 2 in Seattle was producing 16 B-17s per day by May 1944. Douglas Aircraft, which had employed only 68 people in 1936, had grown to 167,000 workers across 9 facilities. North American Aviation produced 500 P-51 Mustangs per month, a long-range, single-engine fighter considered one of the best of the war. Lockheed achieved 1 P-38 Lightning, a twin-engine long-range fighter, every 90 minutes, while implementing 2,127 combat-driven modifications. Supporting industries kept pace. General Motors produced 57,658 aircraft engines under license. Packard, another automaker, built 55,523 Rolls-Royce Merlin engines, the famous British power plant. Alcoa's aluminum production, the lightweight metal used in aircraft, increased by 600%. Dow Chemical's magnesium output grew from 6 million pounds annually to 333 million. The transformation of the American workforce shattered Nazi preconceptions. Women, who made up less than 1% of aircraft workers in 1941, represented 65% by 1943, 310,000 women employed in the aviation industry. At Douglas Long Beach, 22,380 of 41,620 employees were women. Rose Will-Monroe, the original Rosie the Riveter, a cultural icon symbolizing wartime working women, set 3,000 rivets per shift at Willow Run with 99.5% accuracy. Female inspectors at Douglas reduced defect rates from 3.2 to 0.3%. Ford redesigned tools for smaller hands, inadvertently improving efficiency. Lighter pneumatic tools reduced fatigue, while better-positioned workstations decreased injuries. German intelligence interpreted female employment as desperation. A captured Luftwaffe report dismissed these workers as temporary and predicted a collapse in quality. Instead, precision improved. Women excelled in detailed work, wiring, instruments, inspection. Their integration represented democratic strength, not weakness. As American production soared, Germany retreated into fantasy. Göring authorized the Jaeger program in February 1944, dispersing production across 729 underground facilities using slave labor. The Mittelbau complex employed 60,000 prisoners in horrific conditions. 20,000 died. These underground factories produced more defects than aircraft. Slave workers sabotaged components, transport delays crippled coordination, and quality control collapsed. The entire Mittelbau complex produced fewer engines per month than Ford's single plant in Chicago. Meanwhile, American innovation accelerated. Boeing developed modular construction for the B-29, the most advanced bomber of the war, capable of high-altitude flight, built in 4 plants with fully interchangeable parts. The pressurized B-29, costing $65,000 each, incorporated technology Germany couldn't match even in prototypes. By early 1945, the U.S. was producing 100 B-29s monthly. June 6, 1944, D-Day, showcased the culmination of American production. The invasion deployed 11,590 Allied aircraft against 319 German sorties, a 36-to-1 superiority. This was not tactical advantage, it was industrial annihilation. Between January and May 1944, the preparatory bombing campaign dropped 145,000 tons on German targets, exceeding the total German bombing of Britain during the entire war. Transport aircraft delivered 3 airborne divisions in a single day, using more planes than the entire German transport fleet had ever possessed. By December 1944, individual attacks involved 1,200 bombers, escorted by 900 fighters. The P-51 Mustangs had the range to reach Poland, the performance to match any opponent, and existed in such numbers that losses were irrelevant. German pilots called them Indians, swarming everywhere at once. As defeat approached, even Nazi leadership recognized the production catastrophe. In December 1944, Goebbels, the Nazi Minister of Propaganda, wrote in his diary, "Göring's promises of Luftwaffe superiority now seem like criminal delusions. We are fighting the greatest industrial power in the world with rhetoric." Rommel, the famous German general, told his staff before D-Day, "The Americans can lose 10 tanks for every one we destroy and still crush us. When they land, they will come with such material superiority that no position can hold." Even Hitler admitted to Speer, his Minister of Armaments, in January 1945. "We should have listened to Böttischer's reports. Their industrial potential was decisive. While we built hundreds, they built tens of thousands." Albert Speer later testified that American bombing reduced German production by 35% for tanks, 31% for aircraft, and 42% for trucks. He stated unequivocally, "The American attacks, which followed a systematic pattern of assault on industrial targets, caused the collapse of German armaments." The German jet fighter Me-262, operational by mid-1944, represented genuine innovation, 100 miles per hour faster than any Allied fighter. Hitler and Göring believed this wonder weapon could restore air superiority despite numerical inferiority. But Germany produced only 1,430 Me-262s in total, with never more than 200 operational at a time. The engines required overhaul every 10 hours, and critical materials were unavailable, forcing inferior substitutions. The United States, meanwhile, had begun jet development in 1942. Although the Bell P-59 proved inferior to German jets, Lockheed's P-80 Shooting Star, superior to any German design, entered production before the war's end. America's industrial depth allowed simultaneous pursuit of multiple technologies, a luxury Germany could not afford. The contrast epitomized the outcome of the production war. German technological superiority in jet design meant nothing against America, its ability to produce thousands of conventional fighters while simultaneously developing next-generation aircraft. Quality without quantity proved useless in total war. The arrest of Hermann Göring on May 8, 1945, by elements of the U.S. 36th Infantry Division marked the beginning of his confrontation with reality. Initially defiant at the interrogation center in Augsburg, Germany, he maintained that German technology had been superior, defeated only by numbers. His subsequent transfer to Camp Ashcan in Luxembourg, the facility for high-ranking Nazi prisoners, brought intensive interrogations. In July 1945, Major Kenneth Heckler conducted extensive interviews documenting Göring's evolving recognition of American industrial superiority. "I knew American industrial potential was great," Göring admitted to Heckler, "but the execution exceeded my worst fears. That single factory at Willow Run produced more aircraft than our entire bomber force at its peak. It was incomprehensible." He expressed particular astonishment at American logistics. Their ability to supply forces across 2 oceans while maintaining domestic production. This was beyond our conception. We could not adequately supply forces 500 kilometers from Germany. You supplied armies 8,000 kilometers from the United States. During his trial at Nuremberg, prosecutors presented Göring with overwhelming evidence of American production superiority. Charts showed the United States producing more aircraft monthly in 1944 than Germany managed annually. Films of Willow Run's assembly lines were shown as prosecutors listed German cities destroyed by bombers from that single factory. Göring's testimony on March 14, 1946, revealed his struggle to grasp the scale. "I believe the economic and technical potential of the United States was unusually large, particularly their Air Force," he said. "But I never imagined they could increase aircraft production 100-fold in 4 years. Such growth seemed physically impossible." Prison psychologist G.M. Gilbert documented Göring's obsession with production statistics. He repeatedly calculated ratios, comparing individual American factories to Germany's entire output. He seemed particularly fixated on Willow Run, calling it "that damned factory that broke our backs." When shown that the United States had produced 812,615 aircraft engines versus Germany's 241,675, Göring simply stared at the figures in silence. The mathematical reality of defeat was undeniable. The scale of the transformation remains astonishing even today. From 3,611 military aircraft in 1940, the United States produced 295,959 by the end of the war, 97,210 bombers, 99,465 fighters, and 98,684 other aircraft. This represented not only quantity, but systematic superiority in every aspect of production. 2 million Americans worked in aircraft manufacturing at its peak, including unprecedented diversity: women, African Americans, Mexican Americans, Native Americans, disabled workers, teenagers, and elderly citizens. This democratic mobilization achieved what totalitarian command could not: voluntary cooperation that outproduced forced labor by every measure. The workforce that entered the factories in 1941, knowing nothing about airplanes, emerged in 1945 as the most skilled aviation workers in the world. They didn't just build planes, they revolutionized manufacturing itself. Statistical quality control developed for bomber production became a global industrial standard. The automation principles pioneered at Willow Run transformed manufacturing worldwide. The engineers who designed bomber assembly lines would later design the Saturn V rocket that carried humans to the moon. The women who riveted B-24s would raise children who walked on it. The miracle of production did not end with victory. It launched the American century. The financial dimensions defied economic orthodoxy. aircraft production consumed $45 billion in 1940s currency, the equivalent of $800 billion today. The B-29 program alone cost more than the Manhattan Project, the secret program to develop the atomic bomb. Yet instead of bankrupting the United States, war production created unprecedented prosperity. Unemployment, which had plagued the Depression decade, vanished completely. Personal incomes doubled between 1940 and 1945. War bond sales by the workers themselves financed much of the expansion. The employees of Willow Run alone bought $45 million worth of bonds, funding the operations of their own factory. Germany, by contrast, devoted 40% of its entire industrial capacity to aircraft production by 1944, but produced less than half of the American total. Increasing reliance on slave labor proved catastrophically counterproductive. Sabotage was endemic, quality collapsed, and productivity per German worker actually declined after 1943, while American productivity rose 300%. Beyond sheer output lay organizational excellence. The War Production Board coordinated 184,000 companies seamlessly. IBM punchcard machines tracked millions of components across thousands of suppliers. The MIT Radiation Laboratory, employing 4,000 scientists, developed navigation systems that gave American bombers all-weather capability. When combat revealed the B-17's vulnerability to frontal attacks, Boeing added chin turrets within 60 days. When Pacific operations required greater range, Consolidated modified the B-24 without halting production. German design changes took months or years. American improvements took weeks. This adaptability proved as decisive as the scale of production. American aircraft evolved continuously based on global combat experience. Information flowed from Pacific battlefields to Atlantic production lines within days. German aircraft built in isolated underground facilities by slave labor remained static, while American designs improved weekly. The feedback loop between combat and production achieved unprecedented efficiency. Pilot observations reached engineers immediately. Engineers' solutions reached assembly lines within days. Assembly line workers' suggestions reached designers directly. This democratic flow of information proved superior to Germany's rigid command hierarchy. On October 15, 1946, just hours before his scheduled execution, Hermann Göring wrote his final letter. In it, he made his fullest admission of the significance of the production war. The Americans won through industrial power, not military prowess. We were not defeated by better soldiers, but by better factories. The nation we dismissed as capable only of making consumer goods buried the Wehrmacht under aluminum and steel. His final recorded statement to Gilbert was equally revealing. We declared war on an industrial giant while it slept. When it awoke, we were doomed. They not only outproduced us, they revolutionized production itself. Every aspect of their system proved superior to ours. Göring took his own life that night, but his final testimony remains history's verdict on the war of production. The Reichsmarshal who once mocked American capabilities died, knowing that a single American factory had outproduced his entire Air Force's lifetime output. Military historians regard the American production achievement as the decisive factor in Allied victory. Without the overwhelming material superiority it provided, D-Day would have been impossible, the bombing campaign unsustainable, and the Pacific War unwinnable. Richard Overy, the leading historian of the air war, concluded, "The outcome was determined not by fighting spirit or tactical brilliance, but by the weight of material. The Allies won because they buried their enemies beneath an avalanche of production." The numbers fully support that judgment. By 1944, the United States alone was producing more military aircraft than the rest of the world combined. Axis and allies alike. This was not incremental superiority, but dominance by an order of magnitude. Germany did not merely face defeat, it faced obliteration. Yet the significance of the production miracle transcended military victory. It proved the superiority of democracy over dictatorship, the advantage of freedom over tyranny, the strength of voluntary cooperation over forced obedience. The workers who achieved this transformation were not slaves or conscripts, but free citizens united in a common purpose. And here lies the most important lesson we must remember. Those German workers, forced to labor under terrible conditions, and those American workers, freely striving toward a shared goal, were all human beings caught in the circumstances of their time. The German pilots who admired their opponent's industrial might, the engineers who recognized the other side's brilliance, they remind us that even in the most brutal conflict, human respect can endure. It was not the people who failed, but the systems of hatred and oppression that ruled them. The story of Göring finally acknowledging the truth, admitting the superiority of the democratic system over the totalitarian one, teaches us that free cooperation will always triumph over forced submission. That diversity is strength, not weakness. That when people of all backgrounds unite freely for a just cause, the impossible becomes possible. That factory which built a bomber every 63 minutes did more than win a war. It proved that freedom will always defeat tyranny. And Hermann Göring on his final night understood it far too late.